Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Yes, indeed.
We have Daryl Fairweather. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Envy needed help pronouncing your name. It's only because it's Daryl, but you're a woman.
Yes.
I know that's the only reason.
No, I didn't have a problem. No,
And there's
our
only one
producer thought I was
R,
gonna have a
What
problem.
you thought it was? Be honest.
I knew it was Daryl.
I don't believe it.
I knew she was.
Okay.
She also came in and said, "Hi, I'm Daryl."
She said, "Hello, I'm Daryl." So I knew that.
I'm Daryl. It's my other brother Daryl. Remember that?
Daryl is the
Yes.
chief economist
You
of
remember that TV show? What was that?
Yes.
Oh, I forgot what TV show that was.
Well, Daryl Fairweather is the chief economist of Redfin, and I feel like this is so important because we've been talking about these rising rent prices and people not being able to buy homes right now. Some people having buyer's remorse. So can you talk about Redfin and the information that you have based off of the research done when it comes to this market right now that we're in?
Yeah, Redfin is a national real estate brokerage. We also have rentals as well, and we cover the whole entire country. So we can see how much home prices are going up, how much rents are going up. And nationally, rents are up 17% and home prices up 17%. So if you're looking for a place to live, it's just really tough out there right now, on top of inflation and all of that.
So what do you suggest for people to do? Right now, interest rates are what, about over 5%?
Yes.
A year ago, you could get them close to 2%.
Yes.
So what do you suggest people that are looking for homes right now? Is it one of those things you think people are going to start foreclosing on their homes? They're going to start losing their homes? What do you think?
I don't think people are going to lose their homes because anybody who bought last year is in a really good spot because they got that 2% rate and they got a whole lot of equity because home prices went up so much. It's the people who are trying to buy that I'm worried about. And it's really tough. The only option people really have is to look somewhere more affordable, move somewhere else. And people are moving right now. They're leaving New York, unfortunately, going to more affordable places. But if you're stuck in place, you're just in a really tough spot because you're just losing out on money.
And what about selling a home now? Is that going to be difficult for a lot of people that's trying to sell their home?
No.
Right now, it's still pretty easy to sell a home, but that might change by the end of the year. I think demand is going to slow down quite a bit now that mortgage rates are up so much.
Now, how high do you think interest rates will get?
I mean, they could go up to 6%, but it's possible they might just stay where they are. It's possible they might go down because if the Fed gets a hold of inflation, they're gonna slow down on how much they're tightening monetary policy. But if inflation keeps getting worse, then we're all just gonna have to bear it and bear these higher interest rates and bear this inflation.
Now, Daryl, you also study behavioral science.
Yes.
So how does that play into what you do as a chief economist at Redfin?
Well, buying a home is such an emotional decision for people. It's usually the biggest financial decision they'll ever make, and they only do it like once or twice in their whole lifetime. So people make mistakes. They'll get really emotional about it. They'll get all worked up in a bidding war and overbid on a home, and then they might have remorse about it. So it's very psychological. It's not just about economics for a lot of people.
So what are some reasons to be optimistic about black home ownership in this era then?
So one good thing is that there was a record amount of wealth created for black homeowners last year. So if you are a homeowner and you're black, then you actually got a lot of wealth, and hopefully that spreads out to the rest of the community. But the black homeownership rate is still really low. It's below 50%, and while the white homeownership rate is above 70%. And that goes way back to redlining. It goes back to discrimination from the past. If you have a parent who's a homeowner, you're way more likely to be a homeowner. So that's why it keeps going through generations what happened in the past. It's not like it was just in the past. It keeps coming up for future generations.
I was going to ask you, when it comes to Redfin, some people might not know what Redfin is. So I was going to say, please break down what it is for people that don't know what Redfin is. And also, I know people were having problems sometimes with the Redfin estimates and even the Zillow estimates. And they say they were affecting a lot of people's homes, and they necessarily wasn't true. So can you break that down a little bit for both of those questions?
Yes. So Redfin is a national real estate brokerage. We also have a mortgage company and a title company and rentals. You might be familiar with the Redfin app and website. If you're looking for a home for sale, you might go to our website and see all the homes that are for sale. And we have lots of statistics about what your estimate is or what the neighborhood is like. The Redfin estimate is calculated based on how much homes are selling for in your neighborhood that are similar. But it's supposed to be an estimate of what your home will sell for, and there is racial bias in how much homes sell for. Redfin did a study about how much homes are worth in black neighborhoods compared to white neighborhoods, even when the neighborhood's exactly the same, has the same quality schools, has the same kind of transit, has the same job opportunities, and black homes sell for $46,000 less than homes in white neighborhoods. And it's just because, I think what it comes down to is that a lot of people don't want to buy homes where black people live. The only neighborhood was the exception was Houston, and that's because there's a large black middle class there. So the Redfin estimate, it reflects what homes are going to sell for, but there's so much racial bias packed into what homes are worth, depending on what neighborhood it is and who lives in that neighborhood.
I was going to ask that, for the few affluent black neighborhoods there are across the country, are those neighborhoods listed as black neighborhoods?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't go on Redfin and see that's a black neighborhood, but if you're looking for a home and driving around and trying to buy a home, you're going to see who lives there. And I think that's where the racial bias gets in there.
Okay, so they're not necessarily labeled black or white.
No.
Okay, got you.
I was going to ask why. I know Zillow got rid of their estimates because they said it wasn't right. So Redfin still stay with their estimates when it comes to a lot of those houses?
Zillow still has their estimate
They
up
do?
if you go and look at it.
They do, because I always look at what my home is estimated at.
I
all
know
the
they said they
time.
got rid of them or they would get rid of it.
I think they got rid of their home buying program, which is based on their estimate.
Got you.
And Brooklyn is so different too, because I feel like I live in Bed-Stuy. That's traditionally a black neighborhood, but then there's a lot of gentrification. But I still feel like there's a lot more black people that live in Bed-Stuy. And then like the prices of things, I feel like when you look at what the value is of homes, it just varies so much, because there might be a house on this side of the block that sells for $3 million, but then there's something right here that's $800,000. There's such a wide variety, in the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, and that comes down to just perception of what that neighborhood is like and what it's like on one side of the street versus the other side of the street. My family is from Bed-Stuy. My dad was born in Bed-Stuy. My great-grandfather bought a brownstone in Bed-Stuy back in the day. And Bed-Stuy is one of these neighborhoods that was redlined. So if you were trying to buy a home in Bed-Stuy in the 1950s, you could not get a mortgage there. And that still has effects on how much the homes are worth today.
Now, I saw that New York you talked about people moving, and it's the third most popular metro that people are moving out of. What are the top two?
So it's also San Francisco and the other one, I believe, is Seattle.
I feel like
Really?
San Francisco is even more expensive than Manhattan.
It is. It's very
Oh, because of the tech world, probably.
Yeah, so remote work changed everything when it comes to where people want to live. I mean, San Francisco's been expensive, and same with New York, so people just can't afford to live there anymore. And also in San Francisco, they are not building enough housing. So everybody wants to live there, they can't find a place to live. And with remote work, people aren't willing to shack up with like 5 other roommates just to live there. They'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people's mental health in New York, like being stuck in like apartment complexes and not being outside, being able to go outside and get fresh air during the pandemic, that made them be like, I got to get up out of here.
Yeah. During the pandemic, people wanted open space. They were moving to rural areas. They were moving into the suburbs. But now those places are expensive too. So people are having to move into condos and townhomes instead.
I wish I would have bought something in Manhattan when the prices were down during the
right?
pandemic, because now they're saying the rent in Manhattan is the highest that it's ever been.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and people are like bidding for rentals. And I guess because right now people can't afford to buy a home, so people are having to rent. Is that
Yes.
what's happening?
Yeah, so the housing market took off, and now people are looking for other alternatives like renting. But New York is kind of an interesting case because it was, you all know, it was dead during the pandemic, and people were worried about whether it was going to come back or not. But it did come back, and now it's like making up for lost time in terms of how much rent's going up. But San Francisco is still losing people, and the rents are still not growing as much as other places.
And that's how Miami's mad, because they said New Yorkers are moving to Miami, and it's causing their prices to skyrocket. I just did a report. I reported on how they were saying that the rents are doubled, in Miami, and that people can't even, local people can't even get a place out there right now.
Yeah, the whole Sun Belt, people are moving in there. So Miami, Austin, Phoenix, Atlanta. Atlanta's been going up so much. Everybody's looking for warm winters, it seems like, and the prices are just out of control.
I was going to ask, where are the most people moving to? Where? What state? And also, where are people finding the best deals as far as flipping or rentals or any of that?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, it was Austin, Miami, Phoenix that were the most popular. But now those places are so expensive, people are going to some of the like nearby, more affordable places like San Antonio, St. Petersburg, even like outside of the Atlanta area. So when people get priced out of one area, it pushes everybody else who's there. All the locals can't afford it, and they go to the next most affordable area. It used to be that all these high prices were just on the coast, but it's spreading everywhere because everyone's trying to move somewhere where they can afford it.
So are we in a housing crisis?
Yes, I would say from an affordability standpoint, Freddie Mac estimates that we're 4 million housing units short, and it's going to take so long to build out of that. And millennials are the biggest generation, and they're looking for their own places. They're not living with their parents anymore, and we just didn't build any homes for them. So it really is tragic for millennials and Gen Z that like we just didn't prepare for this moment.
And even trying to buy a home that you have to flip or fix up, that's hard too because the cost of materials has gone up, and waiting for things to even arrive, the shortage of those materials and labor and all of that is pretty tough right now.
Yeah, so some people are trying to find a more affordable option by going with a fixer-upper, but that's risky right now because of how much materials cost, how much labor costs, and it's hard for even builders to build to meet this moment because they're having all these problems with labor and materials as well.
Is there anything that can even be done to make homes more affordable for middle-class families? I don't even know what that term means, middle-class, but is there anything that can be done?
We really just need to build more, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Like, we should have been doing this for the last decade, but we need to prioritize this as a whole country, building more, and that means reforming zoning so we have more multifamily housing instead of just single-family homes. I mean, New York is a super dense place. There's a lot of dense housing, but we could still build more. There's still room to build more. And if we don't do that, it's just going to be impossible. You can't just say that rent is capped and expect that to stay that, because landlords will find a way to kind of get around that. We have to actually make supply meet demand.
It just seems crazy, right? Like, you know, if you make a couple $100,000 a year, it feels like middle class.
Yeah, I was just talking
but
to...
there should be the 1%, right?
I was talking to a reporter for like a nationally renowned newspaper today, and he is in affordable housing in New York. Like, this is somebody who's a professional, and he has to go into affordable housing. So that's just how expensive it is. Even people who, you know, you would think are middle class, they can't afford to get into the housing market.
So when the stock market dives and crypto dives, how does that affect the housing market, if it does at all?
I think it will eventually. So during the pandemic, people's stock portfolios were through the roof, and people were buying second homes, like second home purchases doubled during the pandemic. But now that's cooling off a lot. And I think as people's stock portfolios go down, we're not going to see so much demand, at least from the wealthy people. And hopefully that'll get a chance to people who are going in with like FHA loans, government-sponsored loans, that really didn't have a chance to compete against the people who had all that money.
Do you think some people could just be living beyond their means?
I mean, they probably are.
Like, instead of getting a house, they probably should get a townhouse or a condo or something like that?
Well, I think people just expect the value of their home to keep going up. So if they can't afford it, or that they're stretching their budget now, they hope that their income will go up, but at least they have a fixed housing payment. But especially now with mortgage rates going up, I bet a lot of people are trying to stretch their budgets.
What about if you just renting? What would you suggest?
The recommendation is to spend no more than a third of your income on housing, but so many people spend more than that because they just can't find housing that's within that budget.
A lot of people are staying put now too, because if you have a rental, it's too expensive to move out, and then if you try to move, it's hard to find some place that's affordable to move into.
Yeah, the number of vacant units is a good measure for like how easy it is to get a rental, and that is lower than it's been in like 3 decades. So.
Now, I saw you guys also added this whole climate change option on Redfin. So can you talk about how climate change is affecting the housing market? Because there are certain places that you have to get fire insurance, you have to get flood insurance, you know, and some people are saying, don't move here, it's going to be underwater, and I just need to learn more about that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. So on Redfin, you can see the flood factor score, which is how much a home's flood risk is going into the future with climate change. And we also have scores from Climate Check on fire risk, drought risk, heat risk, storm risk. So if you're looking to buy a home, you can actually look up how risky it is in terms of what the climate risk will be. And one of the sad things, though, is that if you look at black neighborhoods, black and brown neighborhoods, they typically have higher climate risk. They have more heat risk. They have more flood risk. So I think that's just something people should be aware of whenever they're buying a home, is like, maybe this home is great now, but think about in the future if you're going to stay there for like 30 years.
Yeah, somebody told me when buying in Miami, they were like, the insurance is going to be crazy for a home.
Well, right now, I don't think it's fully baked into the insurance. I think you should expect your insurance to go up as those risks get higher. So that's one thing I tell people is look at your budget now, but also make room for, you know, if your water bill is going to go up, or if you're going to have to put in remodels to make it more resilient to things like flooding.
You know, a lot of people say, you know, on the coastlines, it's maybe by next 20, 30 years, the water's going to be rising, so it might not be a great investment. What are your thoughts to that?
Well, I think that that's definitely a risk people should be aware of. I mean, I wouldn't buy a house on a coastline in Florida, but that's just me. I mean, some people, they're there for a short time and a good time, not a long time. So I don't want to tell them not to buy. But I think you should definitely be aware of the risks. And maybe that's a reason to rent instead of buy if you're thinking about moving there.
And then we're talking about these mortgage forbearances coming to an end, right? So you said that you don't think that people will end up, as many people as we would think would have to foreclose on their homes.
Yes.
So what are some options? Like if anybody's listening to this, they own a home and they're like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I know you can call your mortgage company and work some things out, but what are some things that people can do to make sure that their home doesn't get foreclosed on?
So if you're struggling to make your mortgage payments, definitely get in touch with your lender. They may be able to work with you, refinance. They're probably going to be willing to refinance right now because they'll get you at a higher rate. So that's the unfortunate part. But also, I mean, it is not a bad time to sell. You'll probably have a lot of equity in your home right now, so at least you can take that cash out and maybe move somewhere else. And maybe you can refinance and take some of that equity out and pay off whatever bills you might have that are preventing you from paying your mortgage.
Is this a time period that you've never seen before for what you do?
The economy is so weird right now. It's like it's so unpredictable. I mean, you try to look at historical patterns. Usually when mortgage rates go up this much, the housing market slows down, but the housing market seems pretty resilient just because people just are so desperate to buy a home. So it's hard to look at the past and really predict the future. And then on top of that, you have what the Fed is doing, what's going on in Ukraine, all of these new technological innovations that may spur more economic growth. So I mean, I just try to stay humble whenever I try to make a prediction.
A lot of people feel like they have to buy a home. We talk a lot about home ownership. When do you think you know you're in a good position to buy a home? Because I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do that. But what are some key things that you should have in place in order to let you know, okay, this is the time?
Yeah, so go and look up what you can afford on your income. There are mortgage affordability calculators online that you can look at, and then look at the homes that are within that budget. And if you find a home that you're willing to stay in for at least 5 years within your budget, then I think it's a good time to buy, because that's when you can actually make money off of your home over that time period, whether the market goes up or down. But if you see a home and you're like, this is kind of settling for me, I don't know if I really want to stay here, then maybe you should just wait and try to build up more savings, or maybe you should look at a different area, or maybe try to, get your career on track so you can make enough money to afford the home you really want.
Because some people might just have to move to a whole nother city.
Yeah, and a lot of people are doing that.
I think it's easy now because of people can actually work from home, but I think when they start shutting that back down and they want people to come back in the office, I think it's going to be a mad dash back to those cities that are losing people.
That's what's happening in New York.
Well, we appreciate you for joining us.
Well, I was going to ask about those migration hotspots people are going to. What are some of the trends you see pertaining to that?
Those markets are just on fire right now because everybody's moving there, and the locals are getting priced out. People who come in from out of town, they often have more money because they're coming with more income, so they just outbid all the locals, and the locals get displaced. But it's a good thing if you're a homeowner there because you just see your value going up. That's the thing. That's a great thing about being a homeowner, is that it really insulates you from things like gentrification or people moving in, because you can just stay put. If you're a renter, you're kind of at the whims of however the market goes, and you just have to take it.
That is one of the beauty. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what about buying a house sight unseen?
That is a new trend, too, that we saw a lot of during the pandemic, especially because people couldn't actually go see the homes. So there are 3D tours that you can do. Agents were doing virtual tours, and a lot of people were just like, I'll buy it. And investors, too. Investors often just will buy a home sight unseen because they're buying hundreds of homes, and to them it's just all the same.
Caesar buys a bunch of them like that. I think I bought one or two like that, but he buys hundreds of them because he knows the market, he knows the area, he knows the block. So he's like, I'm getting it so cheap, even if there's extra work that I have to do, I know I still have enough meat on the bone to make some money. So a lot of people do that too.
Can you go to, can you find out if somebody's home is getting foreclosed on and go to them? Because I've heard people do things like that, right? Go to the person who's selling their home or about to get foreclosed on and just have a conversation with them and try to work things out. Do you see that happening?
That does happen. Sometimes it can be predatory. Somebody will knock on your door and say I'll take care of it for you. And then people don't read the fine print and realize they lost their home. And there are other programs where you can buy somebody's property tax bills off of them, and then if they don't pay it, then you get the house. But yeah, I would just be wary.
It's not a good feeling to be that type of person who would do something like that.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people that do print out flyers and they send it to different areas, and then if you're about to lose your home, we'll pay for your home and give you a little extra for your pocket. So people sometimes do that because they're like, shoot, I'm gonna lose my house anyway. So if I can walk away with an extra $20,000, $30,000 or $50,000, so I know a lot of people that actually do that.
If somebody's coming to you with one of those offers, I would just look at all of your options, because there's probably a better option than just the person who knocks on your door.
Now, I was about to buy this home, and my realtor told me it wasn't a good idea because it was a 2-family house, and there was a person living there on the top floor, and the owner told me I would be responsible for getting them to move. What would be your advice on something like that?
I mean, yeah, being a landlord, it's a big responsibility. Tenants have rights. You can't just raise the rent on them. If there's rent control, you can't just evict them just because you don't like them anymore. So just realize that it's a risk going into it. Make sure that you trust this tenant that you're taking on. And I would be wary of getting into a situation where you're taking on a tenant that you didn't actually vet yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, give me your information so people could get and follow you and get in touch with you if they want to.
You can follow me on Twitter at Fairweather PhD, and you can also just reach out to me on Redfin. You can even email me, daryl.fairweather@redfin.com, and I'll respond to you.
I appreciate it. You gave us such great information. I met you on Twitter.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, we need to have her up here because there is a lot going on that we want to make sure we have somebody who is an expert. Come
I
up
appreciate
and
that. And I
discuss.
know that you're on your hustle with your businesses, and I really respect that. And I am all about bringing economic knowledge to the culture, and y'all are the culture.
Thank you for coming.
Well, we have
Yeah.
it's Daryl Fairweather. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.